So being on a plate, we start with Daniel.
Find Daniel to...
Hey everyone, I'm joining from Merced, California, so it's very early in the morning here. The sun's just coming up, but I'm happy to be here and look forward to seeing everyone's presentation. My presentation is called Montage Database Documentary, a historiographic toolkit for filmmakers. I'm going to go ahead and share the project that I'll be presenting. Okay, so the objective of this presentation is to demonstrate a theory-praxis research method for documentary filmmaker scholars that I developed while researching my dissertation titled Counterpublic, the Politics of Committed Film in the Philippines. The research focuses on the Philippine new cinema of the 1970s to the 1980s and follows two articulations: academic writing surveying primary and secondary texts in the field, and a parallel interactive documentary and social history. So you're looking at the interactive documentary here. The social history consists of conversations with 25 cultural producers and political participants active during Philippine so-called democratization, the democratization movement in the 1980s. These conversations thoroughly explore the subject's involvement, motivations, and ideas, and were carefully lit and filmed with 2 cameras. I began experimenting with several different ways of putting the video footage into tension with the past, drawing upon several theories. One was Ellen Sekula's argument for combining a materialist cultural history with montage. Another was Steve Anderson's notion of database histories, which instead of historicizing the past, use database and search engine to construct a more flexible, reflexive, and participatory digital archive. A third was borrowed from Sharon Daniel, who envisions interface design as arguments and user interaction and navigation as inquiry. Through an almost iconoclastic approach, Daniel's practice attempts to challenge the viewer's assumptions about narrative construction while foregrounding contradictions between politics and aesthetics. So these are all things that I drew from. The result, an interactive database documentary, combines documentary and qualitative research methods. As with many documentaries, I was dependent upon collaboration and ideas proposed by the subject, while questioning the subject's truth claims, aesthetic construction, etc. In terms of the interface design, I chose images of archives, vinegar syndrome afflicted film, and distressed video as metaphors to represent reification and memory loss. So you see some of the distressed video here in the background of this particular page. It's this video that I've just pulled from some old 80s films that have been then translated into video. Let's see. I broke down the interview material and I'll show you the interviews in just a second, into roughly 1-minute edits consisting of tightly intercut, differing, and even contradictory recollections of 2 interviewees. The script for these edits was written, quote unquote, using qualitative analysis software, and I used a software called F4 Analyze, revealing patterns and topics that might not otherwise have surfaced. So I essentially identified thematic nodes per the qualitative analysis method to construct these edits. So the viewer can access these edits on the interactive documentary, which was made using the software Clint, by clicking on either Counterpublic over here or Committed Film over here on the other side. The site on the right is supposed to contain nodes that pertain to the history of film, things that are happening within the film industry at this time. And this category on the left, the Counterpublic category, pertains more to politics and things that are happening in the public sphere, which are more mediated by video at this time. So sort of also looking at this tension between film and video with the design as a metaphor. So the long form interviews are available from a drop-down menu linked to a YouTube channel. So this also resides on a separate channel. The idea is not only to preserve the excess footage, but to publish the informant interviews for viewers who either reconstruct the research process themselves or if they prefer, they can perform their own research. The interactive documentary is published online at counterpublic.net. So I'll just show you a quick clip to conclude my presentation. Let's see here, and I will unmute. Okay,
My
so
husband started as a writer. My husband started as a writer. He believed that using the same form, for example, just straight documentary, like just covering a rally and publishing it as such, is not very effective.
Committed documentary, it's a specific filmmaking movement that treads to that principle of partisanship.
The principal objective was to arouse and organize and mobilize the widest number of people as much as possible.
Their type of commitment is more on the objective representation of specific experiences, for example, of the impoverished sector.
Sometimes it could be a turnoff because you are already identified with a certain spectrum and political groupings.
Well, the standing debate on art for art's sake versus art with social relevance or committed art has long been debated.
Like a good supporter of the National Democratic Movement, there's the pressure to also popularize the terms because that's what identifies the movement. Its definition of what the causes of the problems in Philippine society are.
More artists are getting themselves involved. Social conditions, there's social unrest. So it's no more that debate of do I make my art just for art's sake?
He wanted to explore other forms and not just be stuck with just straight documentation. It scared him if that's going to be the direction.
okay, so I'll leave it there. I think I've reached the 5-minute mark by now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. That's great. So they're putting things into dialogue. Excellent. So now we have our second presentation, which is Ana Sofia Almeida. Have I said that correctly?
Yes.
Almeida. Yeah.
I'm going to
So,
share
off you go.
see if I can. Is everybody, you can see?
Yeah, that's good.
So good afternoon. I'm Ana Almeida. I'm a PhD candidate from Portugal. I'm in early stages of conducting a practice-based research on the topic of interactive documentaries and home movies, although I here go to the archive. And as I began to identify that interactive documentaries that use and repurpose archives, I found a short history of the IRIs, and I was looking for gestures of appropriation and recontextualization. And while preparing for the symposium and making this relation between this close reading of a short history of the IRIs in my own future practice, I was asking, how can archival footage serve as the basis for multiperspectival thinking in an interactive documentary? As in my own future practice, I'm thinking about co-creating an interactive documentary about human migration while repurposing archival footage. For context, a short history of the IRIs, produced in 2013, is an interactive documentary that explores more than 2,000-year global history of vertical living and issues of social equality in an increasingly urbanized world. The 4 short films are made mainly with New York Times Visual Archives and are the centerpiece of the project. As interactors, we can dig deeper into the archival materials, and I will also dig deep here if I can. Namely, part 2, concrete in the section century, we may explore and look at the archive. Click, see more, explore, click, see the back, like a postcard with a message, which reveals to us more details and may change our initial perception of and reading of the archive. We also identified that these records act as repositories of memories, a collective memory, involving visual composition, where the materiality of the archive is made present through the visible textures, the catalog numbers and written annotations, stamps, that I think that enables a sense of proximity with the archive. And this proximity may be physical in this separation, but also emotional. Also this proximity with the archive remind me of D.D. Aberman and how he says that the image archive as an object requires the establishment of imaginative and speculative relationships to become decipherable. So I think I underline here a lot in this presentation the meaning of images, that we should question these images, and especially behind the migration of digitized archives and also digital archives, but here for the purpose, the digitized archives into interactive documentaries that can go beyond the screen. Also in the interactive documentary, in the left side of the menu of the interactive documentary, there is, reader submitted images, personal archive and text. And here we are not only acknowledging the imaginative and polysemic functions, as Paulo Favero says, in this case of the archive, but also the opportunity to think interactive documentary as a space where users and interactors can share their personal experience of everyday life, but also traumatic and insensitive experiences. As a result, it is necessary to rethink the very terms through which we address images, while keeping in mind how to assemble difference, diversity, and interdisciplinarity approaches. This was written by Patricia Zimmerman, as regarding as well to polyphony. In a short history of the high-rise, we emphasize the agency in the exploration, immersion of these materials, understanding the historical, social, cultural consequences of vertical living in an increasingly urbanized world, highlighting the social disparities and a lack of equality. So the premise for future practice is to reflect on archival footage beyond its illustrative status, and how can analog archives contribute and enable the multi-perspective thinking to address social issues while igniting a collaborative nonfiction interactive project with diverse voices and perspectives. And of course, this is a complex journey, but we are excited to pursue these lines of investigation. How can these materials be the visual imagery and another layer to the testimonies and stories from individual to collective experience that may regard identity, trauma, and memory? How do we enable these dialogues and prompt other conversations both within and outside of a web-based interactive documentary? Thank you so much. I probably would have some things that I've left out, but I'm thankful so much to be part of the symposium. Thank you so much.
That's great, Anna. Well done. Thank you. Very interesting. So we've got a third one then, Rosella Schillaci, who's, I think you're a bit further down the line with your PhD now, aren't you? Yeah. Have you submitted it yet, or it's still in process?
I'm finishing to edit the 360 film. So in fact, I'd like to show 2 minutes of the clip. Mm-hmm. So we can, I can also speak about problems of using this kind of technology. So very briefly, I'm a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, and a visual anthropologist that since few years is doing a PhD in digital media in Lisbon. So really my interest was to investigate how, which were the potentialities and the limitation of immersive storytelling, so 360 video, applied to visual anthropology research. And I wanted to do VR experimental film in a prison. This is my topic, with mother and children that live together. So my main aim was really to have their point of view, different point of view from mother and children about confined space. So the objective was to have really a multi-perspective piece of work that could also represent painful, traumatic experience, but also imaginative, hope and dreams for the future. So for me, 360 was a way to work with a less linear structure, narrative structure, although my piece is linear, is not interactive. So it's just a 360 that you can navigate. There are a lot of things to say because this research has been influenced also by pandemic and all the problem, because I started just before pandemic, and I had to change several times my methods because I wasn't allowed to do a field work long. But I have to say that really VR helped me as a method, and also helped me to grant the access to prison, because institution didn't want to have traditional filmmaker and journalist inside prison during pandemic, but they were very keen to experiment a new form of language like VR. So and also I have to say, mother and children, they were enthusiastic to try in a playful way to express their point of view. There were lots of problems, and I'd like to say something at the end of the clip, but now I just like to show 2 minutes if I manage. Of course, I'm showing with the computer, and we would need the headset, but I'm trying to move in the space while I'm showing it. Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Non mi chiede proprio per andare fuori, perché lui ha capito che io non posso uscire. Dice, un giorno quando andiamo a casa mi porti a giostre, mi porti a parco, e devo dire sempre di sì. Di sì, sì, sì. E ogni tanto si trova pure i cucinelli e chiede sempre alla fortuna che se ne va via dall'Icamo. Mi sentivo sopra l'acqua così, dico, sono sopra l'acqua, dove sono arrivata io non vedo più niente, no? Mi sentivo fuori dal mondo, non lo so. No, mi vengono i brividi ancora quando mi ricordo quando sono entrata in carcere. Prima volta da incubo. Prima di tutto avevo le allucinazioni veramente, io pensavo che sono impazzita.
Una volta io sono andata in una casa che faceva paura, che era molto paura, che c'era un mostro che voleva prendermi il sangue. Il papà sarà il manzozzolo e la mamma sarà la principessa. Io sarò il lupo.
Okay, I think I have to stop. This is just 2 minutes of a 20-minute piece. And just to end about discoveries and the issues raised, you have to say that really VR pushed me and obliged me to embrace a very deep collaboration process using illustration, animation, and 360 footage. So, but I have to say, we faced, because we were a group of people with technician, practitioner, artists, and mother children were, but we faced several technical problems. And VR, 360 video in this way requests a lot amount of money, a lot amount of time, and a really powerful computer system to edit footage and animation. And also a problem of distribution. So how do I share a VR piece that need asset? Like now I was obliged to move by myself, the mouse, while the main purpose is that audience as an agency, no? So has to move by itself. And in this way with desktop, we lose the immersion feeling that the audience has. So we really need to think how to distribute it when you have a group of people. Like I'd like to do it in class with children that are 25. So you have to invent and invest money, like to buy cardboard set, find a way to distribute, taking the affordances of the VR. That's it. There are many things to say, but I think this is enough. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So yet again, and this with the posters, there's even less time to talk, but we wanted to get as many people in today. So we've just got just over 5 minutes. So again, I could say loads, but I'm not going to. I'm going to see if there's questions from the audience first. I haven't looked in the chat yet, but anybody wants to raise their hand? Was there anything in the chat? Anybody got anything they want to say? 3 really interesting projects at different stages and with different technologies and platforms. Any? Yeah,
can't find the little hand thingy.
I saw your hand. Yeah, that'll do.
I'm interested. So, Rosella, at the start of your little presentation, you said that your documentary wasn't interactive. You said it's not interactive; it's linear. But given that people are on a 360 headset, is that's still a form of interactivity, is it not?
Yeah, completely agree, because also I design the shooting and animation in order to have a circular action, let's say. So it's really up to the viewer to decide what to watch, but it cannot really, like in an interactive piece, choose which kind of narrative. The narrative is there. You can always only decide where to look and what to listen at.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, so I mean that this raises this dialogue between interactivity and immersion, and different people define it in different ways. But in one way, it's all interactive if it involves computers and processing, and as you move your head, it's a form of interactivity. Yeah, Anna, you've got your hand up.
Actually, we are here for iDocs and not interactive documentary.
Okay.
And if I remember rightly, the I can stand for anything. So I'm absolutely fascinated by your project. And I also have a question that was just a remark, because I think it's absolutely interactive. And it is I. And I was wondering why you've chosen this playful and also, well, you're introducing a further element, not only the physical world as we have it to touch it, but also the creative stuff. Why did you choose this approach? Certainly for more than one reason, but what were your main arguments for that?
Yes, from the beginning, I want to try to represent the imaginary world of children. So I really wanted to know what do they imagine about this place. what they wish to have and that don't have, and what the hope for the future, coming back to the idea of hope and future. And this is very difficult to represent. You need, I really learned by doing. I didn't have clear idea at the beginning. I tried different methods, and what really helped me is the illustration labs I made with an illustrator. And also for mothers that don't speak very well, some of them are not literate, I found that illustration and animation really has helped me, both as a research method, but also to represent their world, to express painful feelings and painful memories, but to express in a very visual way, not only using words, because some of them were strangers and foreign, sorry. So this idea of visually represent something brought a lot, also from this, they were surprised to what they could draw, what they could remember even. And was a very delicate way also to come in, traumatic experience in different methods, and also to leave open to them. So they were open to draw what they wanted. There were not really forced topics to speak about.
That's lovely. That's linking to our first presentation then. So we have got the safe space, and not only the audience, but also the safe space for the makers, or the participants in this case.
I thought your transition was really interesting, because you tend to think with VR, you're put in a world and you're immersed in a world, and it's not necessarily that multi-perspectival, but you made a transition in the middle of that world to a completely different point of view. And so I thought that was really interesting. And then the other two projects, you know, just different ways of approaching things, and the idea of polyphony, you know, as a place where you've got different consciousnesses that are unmerged but in dialogue. And so we saw different types of representation in the other two interfaces. And so for Anna, that's all to be done, isn't it, as you're scoping up a project and just thinking about what technologies and platforms. And I thought it was also interesting, Rosella, that, you know, you were saying in terms of the prison context, you actually, by working with VR, it gave you access because there was an interest in exploring something new. And so that worked in your favor, you know, even though the technologies and the costs and the, you know, the technical issues and the issues then with distribution become massive. But, you know, distribution with all these things is an issue, isn't it? So any other final comments, or do any of the other two people want to say anything? Anna or where are we? Daniel, anything you want to say as kind of closing comments or thoughts? No?
I have a quick
Alison.
question for Anna.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Okay, so jumping just off your comment about cost for Rosella. So Anna, using archives, are you faced with any costs in sourcing your archives, or is it all sort of free access?
I'm at the early stages, but yes, I've already encountered some institutional archive that they ask a lot of money for me to use their archive. And specifically because I'm also interested in old movies, there's a difficulty to encounter this personal archives, not that they will be in an institution per se. So I'm also doing that, kind of mapping those encounters with the personal archive, with old movies. But yes, there's some costs attached to institutions, yes.
Okay,
so far.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we should wrap and maybe just have a couple of minutes pause before the next panel. But thank you, everyone. And, you know, you can use the private chat as well if you want to get in touch with people and ask further questions. So we've kept everything as open as possible to enable, as best as we can, the dialogue to continue. So well done, thank you. And a couple of minutes and then we'll have the next panel.